The Aztecs were black Africans. Many Mexicans claim that blacks are stealing their history. Although some Mexicans and Euro-nuts assume that the only blacks found in Mexico today are descendants of African slaves, this is untrue. Many Native Americans were blacks. One of the greatest Afro-Mexican civilizations was the civilization of the Aztecs. Yes, the Aztecs. A 16th century Spanish chronicler described them as follows. The people of this land are well made, rather tall than short. They are swarthy as leopards, of good manners and gestures, for the greater part very skillful, robust and tireless, and at the same time the most moderate men known. They are very warlike and face death with the greatest resolution. Here are pictures of the Aztecs. The Aztecs were not Olmecs. They appear to be related to the Shirla and Ocos people in appearance. Note the nose. The Aztecs were original black Native Americans who lived in central Mexico. The Aztecs lived in central Mexico and founded Mexico City. The people of central Mexico have traditionally been called Chilango. The term Chilango refers to the skin color and hair texture of the black people, the Aztecs who founded Mexico City. Nahua people call the Aztec Chilenco due to their dark brown-red complexions in comparison to the native Indian Americans. The Maya called the Aztecs and other central Mexicans Xilan. Xilan in Maya means curly or frizzy-haired. Here we see the last two Aztecs, and we also see people from Shirla that come from early Mesoamerican pottery. And as you can see, note the curly hair of the Aztecs and Yokos. The Aztecs were related to the Ocos and Shirla people, who were already living in Mexico when the Mandi-speaking Olmec arrived in America 1,200 BC. The fact that the Shirlas and Ocos look like the Aztecs suggests that there may have been millions in the area, millions of blacks when the Spanish came on the scene. Many of these native black Americans were exterminated by Spanish and native Indian American groups. The blacks, or Costa Chicas, or Negro Costa Chicanos, lived in a region where numerous artifacts have been found that indicate that black cultures thrived in western Mexico, Belize, and Guatemala, almost 200 years before the Olmecs sailed to Mexico from Africa and landed on the Gulf coast of Mexico. In Belize, around 2400 BC, we see evidence of agriculture. The iconography of this people depicts Africoids. And at Zapapa, in 1358 BC, astronomer priests invented the first American calendar. Yes, the first American calendar. In addition to numerous sculptures of blacks dating to the 2nd millennium BC, we also find that there were early blacks at La Vinta, Chiapas, Teotihuacan, and Tlatelolco. The earliest culture founded by blacks in the Pacific Coast region was the Mokaya Tradition. The Mokaya Tradition was situated on the Pacific coast of Mexico in the Soconusco region. Sedentary village life began as early as 2000 BC. By 1700 to 1500 BC, we see many African communities in the Mazatlan region. This is called the Barra phase or Ocos complex. During the Barra phase, these black villages and the villagers within them made beautiful ceramic vessels with 3 legs. They also made a large number of effigy vessels. The figurines of the Ocos are the most significant evidence for blacks living in the area during this period. The female figure from Aquiles Orden is clearly that of an African woman, and if you note, her hair was curly or braided. The blacks of Mokaya tradition were not Olmec. The tradition of the civilization of Mokaya began 700 years before the Olmec arrived in Mexico. Yes, there were already blacks in Mexico before the Olmecs. The Aztec were original Native Americans who lived in central Mexico. They're related to the Ocos or Cholos people who were already living in Mexico when the Mandi-speaking Olmec arrived in Mexico along the Gulf Coast. Here's a 16th century Spanish description. The people of this land are well made, rather tall than short. They are swarthy as leopards, of good manners and gestures, for the greater part very skillful, robust and tireless, and at the same time the most moderate men known. They are very warlike and face death with the greatest resolution. Both leopards and jaguars are not usually dark, swarthy. The writer must therefore be referring to those that are melanistic, completely black or very dark. They are known as black panthers. Physical anthropologists use many terms to refer to the African type represented by Olmec skeletal remains, including Armenoid, Dungolan, Lumpanoid, and Equatorial. The photo of the last Aztec couple and evidence of African skeletons found at many Olmec sites described as Armenoid by Wiercinski and Chan, and their trading partners from the Old World found by Dr. Andres Wiercinski, prove the cosmopolitan nature of the Olmec society. This skeletal evidence explains the discovery of many African tribes in Mexico and Central America when Columbus discovered the Americas. Armenoid refers to a Negro or African people. The skeletal material from Tlatelolco, which has been described as Armenoid, make it clear that Africans were a predominant part of the Olmec population. These Olmecs constructed complex pyramids and large sculptured monuments weighing tons. The Maya during the pre-classic period built pyramids over the Olmec pyramids to disguise the Olmec origin of these pyramids. Here we see a Tlatelolco dancer. The last Aztecs were these two couples. As you can see, they were Negroid and had very frizzy or curly hair, just like the hair that other Aztecs are described as having. Here we see, in a sense, a Tlatelolco Armenoid. Note the noses of this Aztec couple, how they agree firmly with the early people of Mexico. Big nose or Armenoid features of the black Mexicans probably go back to the Cholos and Ochos. Here's a picture of an Ochos female. Note the nose. Here we see the Aztec. Again, we see the frizzy hair and the distinctive nose that was common to the Ocos and Cholos, the ancient peoples of Mexico. The Aztecs were the original black natives who lived in central Mexico. As you can see, they were related to the Ocos and Cholos people who were already living in Mexico when the Mandi-speaking people arrived. Just look at those noses. May I say more? They belong to the Armenoid type. Alonso de Zorita Alonso de Zorita wrote of the Mexicans, "These people are by nature very long-suffering, and nothing will excite or anger them. They are very obedient and teachable. The more noble they are, the more humility they display. This description suggests a meek and spineless people, very different from the Aztecs of popular imagination, who are forever shedding blood on either the altar or the battlefield. The contradiction, however, is more apparent than real. On the one hand, the Mexicans show what Perry has called a very high degree of social docility, the willing submergence of the individual in the personality of the tribe. But against this must be said a streak of personal individualism with a tendency towards violence and extremism. In the military state, like Tenochtitlan, physical bravery was taken for granted, and death in battle was something to look forward to. As a Mexican poet put it, there is nothing like death in war, like the flowery death so precious to him who gives life. Far off I see it, my heart yearns for it." Here we see an altar of an Aztec rain god, Tlaloc, who was uncovered in front of an Aztec main temple, the Templo Mayor, near Mexico City's central Zocalo Square. This is an 11-foot monolith, which is still mostly buried. It is potentially the most important discovery of the Aztec. Some archaeologists speculate the stone slab could be part of an entrance to an underground chamber. The Aztec Empire encompassed much of modern-day central Mexico. It reached its height about 500 years ago. The Aztecs were a deeply religious people, as testified by the altar we just looked at of the Aztec god Tlaloc. The Aztec, in a sense, at Templo de Maro, was a great pyramid where many Aztecs came to worship. Spanish conquistadors destroyed the temple when they razed the city in 1521. Mexico City is built on top of the ruins of Tenochtitlan. The temple was first excavated in 1978 after electricity workers found a giant carving of an Aztec goddess at the site. Remains of the lower portions of the temple complex buried underneath the city have since been unearthed. Here we can see numerous pictures of the various Aztecs and the way of life of the Aztecs. You can note their distinctive Africoid features, and you can note the fact, in a sense, that these people specialized in many of the arts. Don Pedro was a Mexican soldier. Don Pedro, what he did is he left us many writings on these various Aztec people. Here we see other figures of the Aztecs that have been discovered by archaeologists over the years. Many of these artifacts come from the Codex Mendoza. And the Codex Mendoza is very important because of the fact that it has some very good information about the Aztecs. Here you can see a copy of Quetzalcoatl. And this Quetzalcoatl was from the Codex Telleriano. And as you can see, this Quetzalcoatl is not depicted as a European, as many Europeans like to claim. You can clearly see his Negroid features. You can see the conical hat of the priest that Quetzalcoatl represented. Here we see, in a sense, some of the Aztecs, and you can see the Aztecs with their distinctive jaguar garments. And now this person with the jaguar shows, in a sense, the important role of the priest in political and religious affairs. Native Indian Americans have been very jealous of the Aztecs and other blacks. Although today many Mexicans like to claim that blacks are trying to steal their history, it's the other way around. The Indian Americans are trying to steal the history of the blacks, such as the Aztecs. One of the important documents that relate to the relationship between Indians and the blacks is the Dance of the Black Giants. The Dance of the Black Giants may explain the race war which occurred in ancient Mexico. During this war, blacks defeated the whites. The red men, Mayas, and Nahua served as pawns. The whites were defeated by the blacks. The Reds of Maya probably felt that when the whites returned, they would join the whites to overthrow their black overlords, which the Mexicans did when the Europeans came, or the Spanish. In the following episode apparition, the vicissitudes undergone by the white giant who has fallen into the hands of his rival are mimicked. Here we can see pictures, and here we see the white giants and the black giants fighting. The black giant intimidates his opponent by beating the ground ferociously with his sword, while he makes menacing gestures and movements in the hopes of touching or wounding the white giant, who defends himself as best he can by trying to evade and repulse the thrust. The battle is suspended at intervals while the giants pay homage to the sun, but is then immediately resumed with greater fury. During the whole episode, the black giants maintain a menacing stance, not only toward his rival, but also toward the huge audience witnessing the spectacle. Both actors watch each other constantly, trying to take advantage of the smallest error of the other. For whole minutes they are motionless, like statues, then cautiously cross swords as they dart glances around in all directions, as if fearing some invisible danger. Then they come to grips, and each places the point of his sword against his opponent's neck. a tragic pose that lasts but an instant. Finally, the black giant succeeds in decapitating the white giant because his power is greater, an episode that for the short day represents the moment when our Lord was suffering under the domination of the bad spirits. As you can see, many of these Mayas remember the blacks as bad spirits. They're very jealous. They see blacks, in a sense, as people who they should, be afraid of. In fact, when you look at this scene where the black giant has beheaded the white giant, it in fact reproduced a contest that took place in Chibalba, because between Vukun Hunaupu and Vukun Kamen, which are former parishes. The head of the vanquished giant is hung in a tree, but is transformed into a guacal, or calabash. To all appearances, the development of the drama contains excessive details, but in reality they are profoundly revealing of the native mentality and the thematic unity of the work, which is as much Quiche as it is Shorte. Worth mentioning as well is the initial phase when the antagonists scrutinize each other's face before they fight, a mute scene which the Papova explains to us in the interest of obligation of the combatants to make themselves known to each other by their features. Ancient Mesoamerican art also shows the same thing. This piece shows blacks wearing the skin of flayed, light-skinned people. The other piece shows light-skinned people in servitude or being sacrificial victims of the blacks. Many of the codexes that have been written recording the Aztecs were not written by the Aztecs themselves. As a result of a note of caution, these codexes were written or commissioned by whites after the conquest, and these are copies of the originals. Experience tells us that the white man will change artifacts to suit his purpose. But here you can see examples of the Aztecs from the Codex Bourbonicus. But a very interesting codex is this whole codex about the invasion of whites. Here you can see whites that are being captured on shore. These whites seem to be captured and in the boats being covered by blacks. This scene of whites trying to enter the black lands is recorded on the Temple of Warriors at Chichen, Itza. Here we can see some blacks in the Temple of Warriors at Chichen Itza sacrificing one of the black people who appears to have landed in central Mexico to attack the blacks. As you can see, he was light-skinned, and they also record the light hair. So these people may have been some sort of white explorers who happened to reach Mexico in ancient times. Now we can see other scenes in which the Aztecs record their own progression. The Aztecs, we must admit, were violent people. They did fight, and they did want to ensure that they were respected by the other Indians. But much of this cruelty may have been the result of the fact that the Indians themselves were, always fighting the black Aztecs, and they had to defend themselves. Well, we see later the Spanish came, and when the Spanish came, and you can see the Spanish as they attacked the Indians. You can see the dogs eating the Indians, or they're pounding them up and they're massacring. So it was a terrible event. We see that the Spanish did not in any way try to be mild. When they conquered the Aztecs, they killed as many as they could. They tortured them, they hung them, they flayed them. They were quite violent people. They even burned them, as you can see in these pictures. Overall, though, the Aztecs were a great people. We can see the last Aztecs, and here's a picture of one of the Aztecs themselves. Again, you note the nose of this person and also the hair. The artifactual evidence does seem to strongly suggest that the conquest of the Americas came about because of a race war. Apparently, these light-skinned people of Mongol extraction saw white Europeans as potential allies and took advantage of the coming of white Europeans to free themselves from what they felt was black tyranny. This tyranny was the tyranny that they felt they were experiencing from the hands of the Aztecs. They became allies of the Spanish, and for their service were initially spared. That changed later. As a result, the Mexican Indians decided that they would join the whites in battling the blacks, if whites ever returned. This would explain the Mexican tradition of the return of the white gods. Below is Gerard's description of the giant's dance that we discussed earlier. The blacks and whites, they fought. The blacks took the head of the white giant. The Aztecs remained in control until the Spanish returned.